Hello there, voters. The general election is really coming fast now. I'm Julianne Grimm with the Santa Fe Reporter, and I'm here today with Gary King, Democratic candidate for governor of New Mexico. Gary is the current Attorney General, and he's also got experience in the state legislature and other state and federal positions. So thanks for being with us today, Gary.
Thanks, Julianne. It's very nice to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to dig right into it, and with the unpleasant fact that you've been outspent by your rival, and several polls peg you being down on the percentage of likely voters. So you've got about 3 weeks left as of today's recording. How are you going to turn this around and come out with a win?
Well, actually, interesting enough, I don't feel like we have to turn it around because we've been focusing on grassroots. We've been focusing on working people in New Mexico. We've been focusing on those people that we feel like have a reason to vote in this election. As you know, New Mexico is last in economic development. We are next to last in child welfare. Our school systems are struggling mightily. We're losing teachers at an amazing rate, and so we're focusing on those issues. We're meeting with educators. We're meeting with the Native American community. My running mate is a Native American, and has been very successful as a businesswoman. She's a single mom, so we're working with those communities. And it's indeed not money that votes; it is people that vote. And so we're focusing our campaign on people, and I expect that we'll be successful.
So it's often said that the devil is in the details. And you've come under fire for the details of 3 things I want to enumerate. One of them is for the unsuccessful prosecution of Rebecca Vigil-Herron for corruption. The second is in handling of some IPRA cases. In particular, I'm thinking about some emails that were exchanged via a private network. And lastly, for the role that your office played in the early release from prison for Michael Suitor, who's known as the Casanova con man.
Sure.
So, what message do you have for voters about your ability to follow through and to make nuanced, timely choices should you land in the governor's office?
Sure. Well, in each of those cases that you talked about, primarily the discussion revolves around people who don't know all of the facts. And of course, as you said, my opponent has a lot of money, so she's been able to take bits and pieces and put them together into something that is very misleading to people. So with regard to Rebecca Vigil-Herron, for instance, our office got an award from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the investigation that we did because the 3 other co-conspirators in that case all got convicted of federal crimes, tax evasion and such, and it was the evidence that my agents brought to them that made it possible to do that. And so I don't perceive that as an unsuccessful prosecution because the major players in that all were convicted, and it actually doesn't bother me that they were convicted in federal court rather than in state court. And we're training, I think, our judges. My office is the first Attorney General's office in 50 years that's taken corruption seriously and has taken on corrupt officials. And so occasionally the courts, I think, have a struggle with how to deal with that. In the Rebecca Vigil-Herron case, there were 8 different judges in that case because of different motions that the defense filed and such. So we try and improve as we go, but it was one of our early cases, and so I get that. Everybody seems to gloss over the fact that it was my office that put the Casanova con man in prison for 34 years, and I think that there was some clever lawyering by defense lawyers, and it's the judge that allowed him out early. It's not my office that allowed him out early, and so once again that's an important issue. I've forgotten the third case that you talked about. Oh, the IPRA. My office is the office that deals with the Inspection of Public Records Act, and I think, for instance, in the case where the governor is complaining that we released some of her private emails, and we released them to your publication, as a matter of fact, pursuant to your Inspection of Public Records Act request, is that the case law in New Mexico is such that if there's not a specific exception, and in this case there was not an exception for those, that they become public records when they come into my office. I tell people, if Coca-Cola brought me the secret formula for Coca-Cola and I had it, if there's not an exception, I would have to give that up if somebody asked me for that. So it's interesting that I get criticized for being more than compliant with the Inspection of Public Records Act as a general rule, but our office has been very ethical and worked very hard to try and comply with the Inspection of Public Records Act in the ways that we perceive that it should be. And I actually carried the Inspection of Public Records Act in the legislature. I'm mostly responsible for the creation of the modern Public Records Act. So, and then meanwhile, we have all these other things that we've done in the AG's office. We sued the largest banking institutions in the country and got $100 million worth of help for people that were losing their homes. We sued Oppenheimer Company and got $65 million back for families that had invested for education. We sued a company that was loaning money at 1,000%. And got the courts to rule that it was egregious for them to do that, and that they have to return everything, the difference between 1,000% and 15%, to New Mexicans who borrowed money from that company. We're continuing to take on predatory lenders, and so it's actually, unfortunately, not news whenever we do something like that. It's only news whenever there's something that somebody wants to criticize. So
Okay.
so I'm very confident with the work that my office has done, and pleased with the work that my office has done, and we'll certainly stand by our record.
I want to take you back to the Suitor case just briefly.
Sure.
You said just now that it was the judge that let him out of prison early. Do you feel like in hindsight, having reviewed everything that happened, could your office have taken a stronger stance to oppose that early release?
No. My lawyers stood up and opposed the release. The secret there was an interesting twist, but the Court of Appeals actually upheld the conviction that my office got. He was appealing his conviction, and at the end of that, they actually sent the case back to the district court for proceedings consistent with that. So the only real issue there was whether or not we were going to fight whether the district court had jurisdiction to hear the resentencing. And in that case, it would have been unethical for us to say that they didn't have jurisdiction, because our legal study showed that they did have jurisdiction. And so, people might complain about the result of the law, but the truth is that the judge did have jurisdiction to consider that resentencing. And once Mr. Suitor paid restitution to the victims of his crime, the judge was willing to reconsider his sentencing.
Let's talk a little bit about your campaign.
Sure.
You're running for the highest office in the state. You've now been through 3 campaign managers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're going to have better luck with your cabinet if you get to pick a cabinet?
Sure. Actually, I don't feel like I had bad luck with my campaign managers. One of them worked with me all the way through the primary, and we were very successful in the primary. We won by 10 points more than the polls said that we were going to. Mm-hmm. He had 2 young sons and decided that he wanted to spend more time with his family. I actually believe that that's very important, and I was happy about that. The second campaign manager only lasted 2 days, because it turned out that he was tweeting derogatory things about women. And so that wasn't something that I was willing to put up with, and so he had to leave the campaign. And so I hope that people will understand that when I'm the governor, that I won't put up with that. Governor Martinez has several members on her staff who have said very derogatory things about teachers, about the Speaker of the House, about pretty much everybody in New Mexico. They're all still working for her administration, and so I think people should really be more concerned about whether somebody is willing to keep people that have done or said egregious things. And the third campaign manager, came in the middle of a campaign, and I think that it wasn't a good match. And so we're moving forward, and I wish them all well, but the proof will be in the pudding, right? If I win the election, if people vote for me, then everybody will think that I did the right things.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Governor Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
We invited her to appear on camera with you, but her campaign managers didn't even respond to those invitations. So what do you make of that?
Well, I've had 2 public appearances with the governor so far, and in both of those cases, I think that it has been clear that she is delivering a message that was written for her by somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so, I have found that she has not been willing to appear under any circumstances in a place where you can just ask questions, where we can have this conversation. And I think as governor, if people think about it, they will find that she's not been willing to have a conversation with teachers. She's not been willing to have a conversation with state workers about what's going on. And so, I'm discouraged that she won't interact with voters of New Mexico, with the public in New Mexico. But I'm always willing to come and have the conversation. So.
Okay. Well, then, in closing, why should this newspaper endorse you, and why should voters endorse you at the ballot box?
Sure. Well, I think most of all, in my career, I have literally a 30-year career in public service. I served 12 years in the legislature. I'm very proud of the work that I've done and the people that I represented. I carried the first major domestic violence protection law in the state when I was in the legislature. As the Attorney General, I've been fighting human trafficking, and have been very successful in getting human trafficking made a major felony in New Mexico, and working on that. The issues that I have all been issues of dealing with people that need help, with people that my partner and I, Deb Haaland, who's running for lieutenant governor with me, the basis of our campaign has been that government should be there to help people when they need a little bit of help. And so that's why we're for increasing the minimum wage. That's why we're for early childhood education for every child in New Mexico, so that every child can have a decent opportunity to be a learner, and to do well. Because if we do those things, then 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, New Mexico won't be last in child welfare, and we won't be last in job growth, because we will have set a good foundation. And that's always been my strength. That people can criticize me for my campaign style, but nobody really has ever criticized me for the success that I've had in the endeavors that I've done. I was a private businessman. I had my own law office. I was in-house counsel for an environmental engineering company that was very successful here in New Mexico. And I will posit that if people look at my record as Attorney General, that they will find that we were very helpful to consumers. My Internet Crimes Against Children unit's been very successful at stopping internet predators. We actually started an entire nationwide program called Operation Broken Heart, where we made a sweep across the country for internet predators. All of those things are the kinds of things that I'll bring to the governor's office. And more than anything, I'll be honest with people about the problems that we have, and I'll roll up my sleeves and we'll work to resolve the problems that we have in New Mexico. And I will work for the voters of New Mexico, for the people of New Mexico, for working families in New Mexico, and not for the big out-of-state special interests in Texas and Arizona and all of those places who seem to have much more control and interest in New Mexico than I think is appropriate.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for being with us today.
Sure.
Voters, get out there. The final election day is November 4th, but early voting has already begun, so we hope to see you.